The science of symbolism, of course, symbols are daily used by every one of us. Without symbols, no one can live his daily life also. Now what we are going to do is to understand the scientific aspects of symbolism, because it is important in the sense that all the ancient scriptures happen to be the most important texts of the esoteric school of the world, and these scriptures are full of scientific symbolism, which includes three or four different methods of application. Without going into the ancient scriptures of the different nations, we have no basis at all for our modern esoteric studies. If we want to go into the depths of spiritual experience, there should be a methodology to approach, because the alphabet we use to understand something is rather abstract and not so concrete or gross as the man-discovered symbols or alphabet. For example, if we take the man-made symbols, this symbol for the sound A, this symbol for B, it is concrete and easier to follow, and there is nothing abstract about the alphabet we use. But we cannot rely upon this symbolism for the simple reason it received the curse of the Babel Tower. That means it has reached the stage of different symbols in different corners of the world. In some places we use like this. For this same sound, in some places they use this symbol, and in some other language for the same sound they use this symbol. If we begin to follow any one of these symbols, only a fraction of humanity can follow. The barrier of language is there. This barrier is symbolically called the curse of Babel, because a tower was being built, which we call the tower of individual consciousness, which has the soul consciousness as the basis and has the thought as the second level of the tower. And then when it begins to reach the third stage, everyone translates the thought into his own language, and there it is stopped. There cannot be a communication. So we should understand the various aspects of symbolism, because the ancient esoteric schools were teaching about the eternal wisdom, whereas man-made symbols differ from place to place and from time to time. Even the most popular language like Sanskrit or English, which has grown global, cannot serve as a universal study for symbolism. So we can understand that the science of symbolism is very important if we want to make a correct approach into the spirit of the scriptures. And when you really make a proper approach to all the scriptures of the world, you will understand one point. There is a common wisdom which has been revealing itself to the human mind, and the human mind becoming responsive of it. And at some stage of evolution, the individual begins to feel the presence of such a wisdom. And then, as it begins to feel its presence, it makes an attempt to absorb what it feels from within himself and try to express to others what it has observed. In making such an attempt, it has produced some symbols, and through thousands of years, from the many corners of this earth globe, many nations and races has made the same attempt, and the attempt included much personal and much more impersonal about the wisdom. And the wise ones every time tried to filter the personal aspect and take only the impersonal aspect of these teachings. Then they came to understand wonderfully that there was something common even in those symbols they used, and that every time the human mind begins to express its response to the wisdom, it expresses in terms of those symbols that are common to all religions. And when you pick up from all these scriptures the teaching that which is common, you will find the symbols also commonly used. For example, if you draw some regular figure like a triangle or a square or a cross, and if you draw some lines like this and ask 100 people to sit here, ask them what is the difference, at least 90 people will express the idea that these figures are regular and those lines are irregular. What do they mean, regular and irregular? There is something which is making them understand the difference, and this something has nothing to do with the literacy which we know. There is a sense in the human nature itself which the ancient ones, the seers, called by the name beauty. So it is that sense which makes you differentiate between the regular figures and the irregular figures. This gave rise to the need of the study of a subject which we call symbolism. So remember, whenever the word symbolism is used, it is not correct to remember that symbols are man-made. We should distinguish between the two types of symbols. One type, the man-made symbols that are conventional and personal, commonly accepted, and that have nothing to do with nature and its phenomena. For example, the alphabet of any language expressed through script. So they are man-made symbols, and the real symbols are quite different from the man-made symbols. And unless we make a differentiation of these two, we cannot accept the existence of a science in nature called the science of symbolism. Unless our mind accepts the existence of the real science in nature, it is not at all possible to go into the esoteric studies of spiritualism, for the simple reason that esoteric study is not man-discovered, but it is given by nature to the mind of man. Of course, esoteric schools are man-made and man-formed. They come and go, but the instinct of establishing an esoteric school again and again comes from the fact that there is an esoteric science existing in nature. It is an instinct. That means more than a man-made subject. For example, what is the difference between the capacity of reading a book and the capacity to breathe? The capacity to read a book is man-made and purely man-trained. And there may be additional advantage by having the capacity to read a book, but in its true and spiritual sense, there is no loss at all if we do not have the capacity to read a book. But what about the capacity to breathe? It is not man-made or man-trained. Do a professor of respiration, is a professor of respiration required to teach the newly born child to breathe? In that case, he is not required at all, because the child will not survive before the professor teaches him how to breathe. But how is it that the child is able to breathe? Who told him, who asked him, suggested him to breathe? He feels like breathing. That is what is called instinct, which is in itself sacred in the sense given by nature. So we can say that book reading is non-sacred and respiration is sacred only in the technical sense of these two words. Do you remember how these two words are used technically in the works of Alice A. Bailey? Do you remember the two words, sacred planets and the non-sacred planets? Does that mean that some planets are sinful and wicked? Do you remember the two terms, the sacred suns and the non-sacred suns of the solar systems? That never means that some solar systems are wicked. The terms sacred and non-sacred are used in a technical sense. The astrologer in his symbolism uses two terms, the benefic planets and the malefic planets. He calls Venus, Mercury and Jupiter the benefic planets, Jupiter. And he calls Saturn and Mars the malefic planet. Does that mean that Saturn and Mars are devilish in their nature and they are to be killed? No, it is in a technical sense we use these words. This is an example of man-made symbolism. That is, unless one teaches the other people the particular meaning of the word, it is not clear. But whereas natural symbolism is different. Everyone feels what is beautiful and what is not beautiful. This is also called the aesthetic sense of a biological mind, which exists not only in the human mind but also in the mind of any living being and also in nature. For example, if you take the human constitution, you can imagine a line drawn between two halves of yourself. See how the body is made symmetrical. One hand this side and one hand this side. One leg this side, one leg this side. One eye, one nose and one ear. Like that you find two lateral halves. So nature works in terms of symbolism, in terms of beauty and in terms of symmetry. So there exists some science in nature, into the workings of which we are expected to enter. There is a hidden way of nature's workings. There are certain hidden principles working in nature. And the more natural life we lead on this earth, the more calm mind we have, the less worries we have in the mind, the more nature begins to present its hidden secrets to our mind. And if you see, observe a biological cell, it has a center and it has its own surface and it has its own field of activity, which is a chemistry laboratory in which chemistry experiments are being conducted. The same chemicals are produced in the same way which we call the biochemistry of the cell. If you take an atom, you will also find a center and an outline and a field of action. If you take yourself, you will find a center which you call your heart and lungs, your own surface which you call your skin, in between the whole constitution which you can call the field of action. This field of action was in Sanskrit, it was called Kurukshetra, where it was symbolically described that a great war took place between two armies, and a chariot which is called the human constitution is standing between two armies. This is the symbolic introduction given to a great book of initiation which we call the Bhagavad Gita. Same is the case whenever you approach a scripture. Take any one of the ancient scriptures of any nation. They are presented to us on a background of symbolism. And we should understand the nature of symbolism they used. We should differentiate between the two categories of symbolism they used. That is, the conventional or man-made symbolism, which is also inevitable, and the archetype or impersonal symbolism. So, you find that nature has its own symbols, which we can call the center and the outline. So, if you use the word center, it indicates one principle which exists in the atom, in the biological cell, and in the heart. Let it be the heart of a human being or any, the center of which we call sun. Now, we can suspect that there is something hidden in nature. It contains principles that are common in every aspect of nature. And these principles can be felt and studied. And the more we go into the nature of these hidden principles, the more we will be able to understand that which is taking place within ourselves and also outside ourselves. Then we can filter the man-made activity of the world and take the impersonal or the background activity that is going on, and we can check out our own life according to the natural activity, filtering away the various aspects of man-made activity. Then we experience a state which is called liberation. That is an existence of absolute values, which is in fact a freedom from self-conditioning. This is the object of a spiritual student, and it is his duty to go into the hidden truths of nature. And always truths exist hidden in nature, though they are openly taking place. There is always secrecy in the process of the activity of nature, though nature is not concealing any one of these things. For example, the flower becoming the fruit is a hidden process, though the flower never conceals the process. This hidden nature is due to the limitedness of our consciousness. The secrecy in nature's workings exists because of the limitation of our observation, because our capacity to observe is very limited, and the secrecy never exists in nature. And this secrecy and this hidden nature, which depends upon the limitedness of the capacity to observe, is what is called esoteric nature of creation. And one who cares to go into the secrets of nature is called the real esoteric student. And nature reveals its secrets to the human being in accordance with his care and consistency in observing nature. So, the science of symbolism is inevitable if one wants to be a real student of esotericism. And instead of making all the discoveries once again for everyone, everyone can take advantage of the already discovered records, which we call the scriptures of the various nations, which include the wisdom teachings of the masters of various ages. If we take the teachings of a master like Pythagoras, we derive great advantage in knowing how to approach the secrets of nature. It is for this reason the science of symbolism exists. The very activity of nature has its own symbolism, which is different from man-made symbolism. You observe the butterfly, there are designs on the wings of the butterfly. They are beautifully decorated, and both the wings have the same decoration. You will understand then how the symbolism of nature works. If you walk through a flower garden in the morning and bestow certain amount of attention and devotion to the flowers, without calling them flowers and going away, you will understand that every flower has a definite design of its own, a symmetry of its own, the number of petals and the arrangement of petals, and the color combination and the perfume. All these things are pre-arranged. At every step, every flower proves that the arrangement of the flower is not accidental or random, and it appeals to our common sense that there should be a mind in space and an intelligence that is working and it producing these designs. It proves that there is a process which produces only regular forms and not random forms. To differentiate this regular form, man called this process creative process, and the whole thing he called creation. The word creation comes from the Sanskrit root which means well made. So, a study of symbolism makes you recognize space mind. It makes you understand scientifically that the mind of space is a scientific phenomenon and not a poetic fancy. It also makes you understand that poetry exists in two different levels. One is poetic fancy and the other is poetic creation. Then it makes you differentiate between false poetry and true poetry also. Then immediately you will understand the poetry of the scriptures, which is different from false poetry or man-made fancy or imagination. From this point of view, let us try to understand symbolism. The good Lucifer.
Thank you very much.
Let us try to understand a few examples of the study of symbolism of the ancient scriptures. Suppose the esoterist wanted to speak something about numbers. Suppose there are two persons, one the esoterist and the other a mathematics professor, both expressing their idea about the origin of numbers. What do the arithmetics professor explain about the origin of numbers?